The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions, how's it going?
Bad, but you know what? These are evergreen episodes, so I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on like my personal illness that no one could now possibly assume they know based on the context of the wider world what that illness is, because we don't do that. We have a different episode for feelings. This is not the feelings one.
This is not the feelings one, because ultimately I just really appreciate your commitment to the band System of the Down, because you did eventually get up. Come on, get down with the sickness.
I was like the actual band System of the Down. I was late to the party, but you know, I got here. I made it.
Yeah. Good on you. Good on you, buddy. Yeah. No, I mean, if it makes you feel any better, I got double vaccinated on Wednesday, and so I was not feeling well on Thursday. But you went whole hog, man. So good on you.
Yeah. No, I decided vaccines and illness was the way to go. I want to say something specific because I have no idea where else I would put this into the episode about this game. We played Mutant League Hockey. So the cartridge for this game has that like weird little yellow part on the side. And I don't know why some Genesis games decided they were going to do that. They're just trying to like stand out and be different. As far as I know, it didn't do anything. Maybe if I pull on it really hard, like a miracle happens. But the second...
No, my mom told me if you do that, then God cries.
God does cry. But the second I looked at the cartridge when we decided we were going to play this, I was just like, yeah, why did they put this stupid little thing on here? And I can't look it up, so I don't know.
Yep. Well, you can add a post-show bump like the minute that we get done recording. You can go, why the yellow thing? And then all of a sudden you just go way down the rabbit hole, you know, and it's this
there's like some
conspiracy.
Illuminati conspiracy.
Yes, but yeah, we played Teenage Mutant League Hockey.
Okay, so we played Mutant League Hockey, which came out in 1994, which means for the Sega Genesis, which means it's on like, as far as I'm concerned, this is late to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Biker Mice from Mars. Everything is vaguely Halloween-y, kind of like Earthworm Jimmy, sort of gross out, grungy thing that Genesis games were going through, which is fine, but they play pretty fast and loose with the definition of mutants, don't you think?
Yeah, they do. I mean, it's really more like fantasy monsters, you know? It's more like World of Warcraft hockey, you know?
Right.
Or at
There's
least
a lot of skeletons. There's some robots.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, robots aren't like, they're definitionally not mutations, you know?
Well,
but
I guess if maybe it's like Akira robots, like
it could be, or maybe
they're body horror. They just didn't have the pixels for it.
or maybe these robots are mutated, but it's instead of their DNA being mixed, it's their robo or RNA.
That would make more sense. I'm glad we were able to nail that mystery down. But this, do you not feel like this is like, looking back, that this is true, where they're just like, oh, anything kind of spooky just sort of all goes under this mutant, scary, horror, vague umbrella, which is not, honestly, like, I think it's fine. It's probably because I grew up with it. I think it's fine, but it is weird to be like, mutants, like goblins. Okay, goblins. Okay, they're big scary mutants. And skeletons. Okay, like skeletons. And robots. Robots. I don't know about robots.
Well, I think that maybe it's kind of like a X-Men thing where it was just kind of like, I don't know, man, it's just mutants, you know, like how did this person get their superpowers? Like, I can't keep it. Look, it's just mutation. Just don't worry about it. But yeah, I mean, if somebody said, we're going to alter your genetics so you gain a new mutation. Oh, really? What is it? It's just, you're just a skeleton now. It's like, that feels like death. That's death, right? You know?
No, because you'll have like big cartoon eyes. I actually really like the idea of the word mutant being used in the X-Men don't think about it, Morty sense, because that is canonically the reason for mutations in the X-Men is like, we just wanted a bunch of superpowers without having to think about explanations for every set of superpowers. So just mutants. And that, like, I'm totally, I love the X-Men. I'm totally fine with that. Like that is a hand wavy explanation I can support.
Yeah, but this is more like Monster League hockey as opposed to Mutant League hockey. But, you know, And to be fair, I mean, I didn't do any research on this because we don't do research. But I mean, there might be an also canonical thing about like why, you know, there's some post-apocalyptic bomb that went off that transformed everyone into all of this stuff. And now they're all mutants, you know, but.
Oh, I'm with you on that because I took the George tack with this game where I wanted to know how the specific control worked for like doing a certain kind of slap shot. And so I looked up the control in the manual because we were allowed to read the manual. And then I started to read the rest of the manual and then all of the sudden I didn't. So there is actually a bunch of prose in the manual that may completely explain all of this. And I didn't do my job. I didn't read it.
No, dude, the manual is a friggin' encyclopedia too. Cause I also looked at the manual briefly to understand the controls and, which is not a great sign. And so, and then it just, you know, I was like, oh my God, I can't even deal with this to get to the controls. But what is your nostalgia experience for this?
So my neighbor had this game. He was a big sports baller person. And I mean, just all sorts, like, the traditional ones for Americans, like football and basketball, but also less popular ones like hockey was not super popular at that time. But then also like wrestling and NASCAR and just everything. Just loved him some sports. So a lot of the sports video games that I played were over at his house because we were friends and he lived close enough to walk. And so, you know, a lot of video games together. As far as I'm concerned, he may be the only person on earth who actually owned a physical copy of this game because I never talked about it with anyone else, never played it with anybody else. Like he maybe he's the original developer. I have no idea, but like I associate this game entirely with sitting cross-legged on the floor in his bedroom eating Cheetos and then, you know, wiping your hand every single time you eat so that you don't get the controller more filthy, because it is getting filthy, but you're trying to lie to yourself and pretend it's not getting worse.
Yeah, and to be fair, because your hands are getting worse, it feels like it's not getting worse until you go back and pick it up later and you're like, oh no, this is bad. No. So my experience is I don't believe I ever played this game, but I watched the TV show, as I believe we've mentioned on this show a couple of times, because we looked it up, I think, and on IMDb, it still says like, you know, 1989 to nothing. Like it didn't have a conclusion date. Like it was still running, you know, and we were like, is this show still on?
Longest running animated series.
Mutant League. And if I remember correctly, it was Mutant League Sports, you know, because they played basketball and whatever. And I specifically, so I think I had a stomach virus at one point when I watched one of the episodes, because I just distinctly remember that all of the mutants were getting sick over a thing. And like the lizard person's tail like fell off and did not regrow, and they were like, oh no. And I just remember that so cleanly in my mind, like being like sick and in bed and not feeling good and being like, these mutants get me, you know. and so, and so I have this like weird fondness for that series that is completely undeserved, but I think about it still. I'm way old, you know, like it's been 30 years since that event, and I still think about that TV show from time to time. So I don't know what to do with that information, but it is living in my brain, and so far it has yet to play any modicum of rent.
So I feel like that's the same basic wiring that works for like actually traumatic events, right? So, you know, someone who's like, you know, oh, but why do you put up with Johnny? Like he's just kind of a dick. And it's like, oh, we were in the war together. And, even though he struggles because of what he saw, like I could never turn my back on him. It's like, yeah, man, I know what you're talking about. There's this dumb cartoon I watched as a kid. It's like, I hate to inform you that unfortunately these neurons have wired together for the same evolutionary reason, despite mine having no gravitas.
None whatsoever. No, actually, I was talking to somebody recently, and I say this a few times a year, which is, that evolution said, hey, man, I've got this great new design, going to be super high survivability. We're going to have like a really, really strong ability to like generate correlations. It's going to really help this person survive with like hunting and gathering and foraging. It's like, cool. I'm going to do science with it. No, I did not make this for that. There's a whole bunch of different trapdoors and back alleys and things that the brain just is not going to do right. It's like, yeah, I'm going to do science with it and create culture and society. And all of a sudden, so now all of a sudden it's like, why do you remember Mutant League Hockey? And it's like, because fight or flight was happening at the time. And my brain thought it was a bear and thought it was really important that I remember that bear. But it's not a bear. It's Mutant League Hockey. So...
That's you slapped that right on the box. It's not a bear. It's Mutant League Hockey.
This isn't your mom's hockey game. This isn't a bear. This is Mutant League Hockey.
Oh, Christ. Shall we shill?
We shall shill.
So if you're into Mutant League Hockey, you can always subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you always get new episodes. I've been really happy with the way the off episodes are going, the non-review episodes. Response to those have been great, and they're just in the normal feed, so you don't have to do anything different to get those. If you want to see what we're playing next or reach out to us, contact information and game list on the website, links in the show notes. For now, the show still has a presence on Twitter. We'll get into that another time, but you can still reach out to us there if that's your avenue of choice. And I still stream the games we play on Twitch, so if you want to see me play Mutant League Hockey and other nonsense, you can go do that. All again, links in the show notes. If you want to go above and beyond, you can leave a rating and review. My personal ask is just, make a specific game recommendation. Did you have a friend who had a near-death experience with Mutant League Hockey and now you want to give this episode as a recommendation to them? You can do that because these are specific and evergreen. So, go ahead.
Real heroes make their own fate. So cause someone to have a near-death experience.
While watching Mutant League Hockey.
Yeah. Control your own destiny, man. Write your own story.
Yeah. Hashtag not legal advice. And if you want to get extra content, you can support us on our Patreon. Everybody who supports us on Patreon gets the after show, which is just more show. Sometimes it's about the game. Sometimes it's about literally anything else. A lot of tabletop stuff in there too. A lot of D&D stuff. But everybody gets that no matter what level they support at. And if you want to support us at higher levels, you can get your name shouted out on the show. So first, we need to thank our 8-Bit Classics, Jacob.
Also known as Gordie Howe.
Yarno.
Also goes by the name Maurice Richard.
Jason.
I've heard that he's called Sidney Crosby.
John.
Also known as Bobby Orr.
And Kevin.
Mark Messier.
And our 16-bit hero, Michael.
The great Wayne Gretzky. These are all, I am led to believe, famous hockey players.
I am told by the internet that these people play this sport.
And also, for $1,000, Lions and I will have an epic rap battle showdown.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I don't know. The ones that you've said about violence being less off-putting to me than having to do a live rap battle says a lot about where my personal fears lie.
It's like, man, I'll kill somebody, but I don't know if I want to do a rap battle. Like that seems too much.
I don't know if I got the dope beats for that. Let's talk about the audio visuals for this game.
Yeah, it had that. You know what? Honestly, and this may be me allowing my feelings to come in. I'm trying not to do that because this isn't the feelings episode. I was not impressed with the visuals. Honestly, it seemed like they came from, I had to keep remembering that this was a Genesis game because I was like, this feels like almost late era Nintendo, early era like SNES games. I don't know. I was just not that impressed with the visuals on it.
So I can't completely agree or disagree with you. Here is my take on why you might feel that way. The visuals when they are at the primary hockey camera, like the top down of the rink, like you would expect, things are pretty detail sparse, right? And not in a way that's like, these are bad graphics, but what I think they seem to have done is there's a lot of sprite reuse and there's a lot of like stamping where it's like, oh, all of this thing is actually the same sprite just repeated multiple times. And what they seem to have done that for is this game runs at like a perfect consistent frame rate, right? Like it never slows down. It's super, super smooth. And I think that's why the primary like hockey graphics are way simpler and like have a lot of sprite reuse and stuff. And then when you go to like the fights, like if a fight breaks out, or when you are on like the select screen and you're looking at the different logos, there's a ton of like little flashing light effects from like the fire crackling, or like the blood drip will have like a shine on it, or the animation of like the punch is got like way more frames than it deserves for this stupid little fighting mini game, right? And there's a bunch of like detail to the characters, but in all of those instances, there's so much less going on, right? There's less on screen, there's less moving, there's less that the game engine has to keep track of. And so you do kind of get these weird peaks and valleys where it's like, oh, super detailed sprites where everything looks amazing. And then it like plummets back to like, oh, everything is tokenized and you're looking down at the hockey arena. Problem is you're looking at the hockey arena most of the time.
Right. And I think that for me, it was, so I agree with you that the frame rate's nice, and it would have to be in a game like this. Like that would have been crippling if it wasn't. But I think that, most of the time, the main thing that you're looking at is just like you're one guy who's just wandering around, the area, and you're shooting at the goal or not passing, right? But is that there's just not a lot going on, so it just feels like, oh yeah, it's a football game where the person's running from point A to point B, and yeah, so I just when I wrote this down and then stopped playing for a little bit and was thinking about it, I was like, oh yeah, well, I mean, graphics look great for a Nintendo game. I'm like, oh wait, this is a Genesis game. It's so I think that it's very, when you're actually playing it, I think the simplicity of the gameplay actually kind of bleeds into your mind, thinking that the graphics have simplicity as well, because it's not. And so one thing though that I think, I'm not sure whether this was a tail wagging the dog thing, but my guess is that it was, which is that why Mutant League Hockey? It's like because mutants can look like anything, right? People have to look like people. So it was clearly all of the designs here were, what can we make in this area? So I think that the reason why, and we were kind of talking as we were talking about, where it was like, why these mutants? Why did they? What are mutants? Right? Is I think that they were probably like, oh yeah, we're gonna have all these different mutants. It's like, okay, well, they have to look different. So I guess a goblin, right? Because that we can make a goblin. We can make it look like a goblin. What else? Lizard person and a skeleton, because they all have to look different enough, So I think that it was definitely the driver behind the visuals. Behind the theming was the limitation on the visuals.
Yeah, and they do some of the old sports game standbys of, even though most of the mutants are like kind of, if not completely naked, they all are like the right color. Like their physical body is like the color gray or the color green or the color, right, whatever like their team color is. And then they have,
because everybody's playing skins.
Yes, everyone's playing skins always. Even the robot, which it creates a lot of visual clarity, right? You can look and you always know like who's on my team, who's not, who's got the puck, who doesn't, right? Because there's like a big clear like skull or crossbones under you if you're the one who is selected and you have the puck. So you get a lot for that. The thing that I think exacerbated this, the more we're talking about it, is if you are playing an intense game where you are scanning in your periphery constantly, I don't think these things would be quite as noticeable. If you are looking at still images, or if you are playing a game that is not particularly intense, where you're just kind of dominating, then you're like, oh, this is pretty simple. There's like a lot of sprite reuse, right? And this is probably true of most sports games, but it relies on, oh, you're going to be having this like fast paced, intense experience. And so you're not even going to notice that, this sprite is the same as that sprite. And it's like, oh, but what if you're not having a fast paced, intense experience? It's like, oh, then you will absolutely notice, which again, like I get it. Prioritizing frame rate is the right way to go. Prioritizing clarity of information is the right way to go. It just means if you're scrutinizing these individual screenshots as little art objects, you're like, oh, yeah, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, no, I agree. One of the other things that I felt was a little weird, and this is just kind of a throwaway visual note, is so as you kind of said, is it like, it's all different sprites, right? So it's not 3D, obviously, because the Genesis would have caught fire, right? The dead on going straight down or straight up the rink, they all look like they're on pogo sticks, man. I was not impressed with that animation to the degree that the first time. Now, to be fair, it doesn't use that animation a lot because you have to be going dead on straight. So if you're angled at all, it uses like the angled sprite, right? But yeah, man, the first time I saw that, I was like, what is that person doing? Like, are they using a special move? Like, did they get pogo sticks in this game? And then I realized, and then I did it. I was like, oh no, that's just that animation. That's not great,
Yeah, I'm looking at a screenshot, and you're not wrong.
Especially because like they kind of move up and down a little bit, and I'm like,
yeah. Which I mean, what an excellent isolated example of, you're probably not expected to travel a long distance in a perfectly straight line, right? Because there's defenders and you have to skate around them, or you're the defender and you're having to like skate around the person you're trying to get the puck from, or to block a pass from. So the odds that you would just, synchronized swimming skate in a perfectly straight line toward or away from the camera is not real good, but it can happen. And if it does happen, it looks silly.
It does look silly, and I also think that they probably said, all right, they have the side down, side left, side down, side up, and then straight on, straight back, and then on each side, right? I think that they said like, okay, so theoretically, each one of these would be 1/6 of the pie, and it's like, yeah, except that the straight up, straight down is going to be not 1/6, it's going to be 1/10, because they're like, because it doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, it is glaring. Outside of that, I think that the HUD is passable in the sense that it lets you know what quarter it is, what time it is. I thought that the visual
period. Hockey is 3 periods.
Yeah, God, I hate sports. So
it's funny because I did actually get to play this a little bit 2-player. And the person I was playing with also said, like, which quarter is it? And I said, it's not. It's the second period. They're like, same kind of reaction.
Yeah, it's a murder of crows and a cornucopia of geese. So all of this is true. Yeah, so it lets you know all that. I thought that the skull and crossbones was a nice way to let you very clearly know who has control of the ball. You know, let that one go. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because one of the small upsides to recording with like where we can see each other, right? Like we know this is not a video podcast, but we have our cameras on, is just the amount of corn in your teeth during that grin. Was like, oh, that one was not an accident. He's baiting me.
Like, come on, man. Come on, say the thing.
Do it. Correct me.
At one point in the after show, we should regale everyone with the differences that I have learned through you about like the differences between a plinth and a pedestal, or an estate.
Oh God.
An estate and a manor. But so that's for after show. Yeah, pay for that.
Yeah.
Anyways, but yeah. So outside that, I thought the visuals were passable. They were just, I don't know. Yeah, I just wasn't super jazzed about them. And in a game where the whole draw of it is like, it's a hockey game, but mutants, I was like, I mean, okay,
So I do want to make sure I give specific shout to the places where it feels like they did put a ton of their like animation artistic effort, which is anytime a mutant has either a large sprite, like in the fighting scenes, or when they're talking, like at the oh god, I don't know what it's called, the face off, I think, where it's like the puck gets dropped. So you know, like the coach's face like pops up on the screen. There's a lot of little like profile animations and characters in profile animations, like in the fights, and those are straight up Saturday morning cartoons. Tons of eyes popping, squash and stretch, you know, blood, giant Quentin Tarantino blood splatters, bones flying everywhere. Like, you can tell that is what they wanted the entire game to look like. And if this game was made today, that is probably what the entire game would look like, because those animations are not just really good, but where all of the like love and craftsmanship went into. And again, it's hard to fault them for saying, well, when you're playing the hockey game, the hockey part needs to work, right? So you need to know who is doing what, like, have they fallen down? How good does the falling down animation need to look? It needs to look clear enough that they fell down, right? But then when you're in the fight and it's like, oh, and you punch them, how good does the getting punched animation need to look? It's like, it needs to look amazing. Teeth need to be flying out. Eyes need to be going cross-eyed. Sweat needs to be, you know, flying off their forehead. Like, but this isn't the main game, right? But it's the part where we can make the art look amazing, right? It's the part where we can make it look like the cartoon.
Yeah, and it's the part where we can make the art amazing. And I mean, if my understanding is correct, to normal hockey games, the part that everyone cares about, which is the fighting, you know?
Correct.
Yeah, my understanding is that hockey is mostly boxing, but on ice.
Yeah, I've seen, I think, 3 live hockey games in my life, and not only did 2 of them contain several fights, one of them contained a fight before we had sat all the way down. Like, like we got there after the game had started, and we were walking down the bleachers to like get to our seats, and a fight broke out like before I had found my seat.
Nice. Yeah. I it is, and I again, you know, definitely champagne problems, right? But I cannot imagine having. I mean, I don't play many sports to begin with anyways, right? But to be playing a sport and having such anger in me that like, I just, that it is not only likely, but expected that at some point I am going to lose my cool and wail on another industry professional, you know, like that's really frowned on. I don't know in your career field, but in my career field, if I get angry and start punching out my peers, you know, people get called, man.
Yeah, generally, if polo shirts and slacks are considered acceptable work attire, fights are not.
Yeah. Well, we got to start a new company. And we got...
Fight Club.
Oh, that's what that is. But yeah, anything else for audiovisual?
We have to mention the music in the fact that it like doesn't exist, because
yes, it is definitely quiet.
It's so quiet. And this is the exact same problem, I suspect, as the animations being simpler and the sprites having to be so much simpler during the main gameplay, is they don't want a ton of music to distract you. And to be fair, in real sports, they usually don't just have a soundtrack blaring, right? Like that is, there's music, but it's not just playing all the time. So this has a title theme, which is actually pretty good. It's got a team select theme, which is actually pretty good. It's got a little, like when you win or lose a fight, it plays the, what is it? It's not taps, but it's like the ba 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 ba, right? So like, you know, somebody dies, like it plays a little like somebody died music. So this game has music, and it's got that grungy Genesis like sound palette. It's great. And then you hear that like a tiny little bit, and the rest of the time it's just dead silence. There's sound effects. There's lots of sound effects, and they're useful in helping you like orient in the world. But the way I have this phrased in my notes is, this is where I'd keep my music notes if I had any.
Yeah, and to be fair, I do think that the sound effects do a good job of like making it sound like a hockey game. Is that there's just a bunch of like ambient chatter. But yeah, you know, definitely you're not going to be queuing this one up on YouTube Music and listening to it in the car, right?
No, dude. And I actually have made, I think I've mentioned this before, I've made the habit of like I listen to the soundtracks for the games we play sometimes like at meals with my children. And so they will be like, oh, what is this game? Like, what was that game about? Right. Or whatever. And I didn't even look. Like, I'm sure there is a 35-second YouTube video that has these little sound clips in it, but I didn't even bother. Like, why bother?
Yeah. No need. Gameplay?
Yeah, and there's actually a pretty smooth transition here because one of the things that you do get without having music is an emphasis on the violence. So you can, while you are playing this game, because it's hockey, right? This game is hockey. It has all the normal rules of hockey, but then it has like more stuff. So there's violence. Like, not only can a fight break out where you get the cool like side-on animation and it's kind of like Rock'em Sock'em Robot style, which is sort of fun. But then you can also just beat the ever-loving crap out of people on the ice. And one of the ways they add to the incentives for that is the audience tosses weapons onto the ice. So you can pick up chainsaws and like flails and I think like bludgeons and stuff. Like there's just all kinds of crap they toss out, which makes it easier for whoever picks it up to then kill another player, and you can actually kill them and take them out of the game, right? So defeating the opposing team by destroying all of their players to where they have to forfeit is a viable way to win the cup. And I won several cups that way, so I know that it works. But it's served really well by the sound effects, because like the chainsaw makes chainsaw noise and like the flail makes like a swooshy whoosh noise when you swing it. So being able to hear that those things are happening helps support otherwise incredibly lightweight animations. So it's like, oh, that guy has a chainsaw, I should stay away from him.
Right. Especially when you hear run, like it actually says run. But yeah, no. Yeah. So here's the problem that I have with these types of games, which is I don't know the rules to hockey. I don't know how many quarters there are. I don't know who passes the ball. I mean, so
when can we take a free kick?
When can we make a score point? Yeah, I mean, so the issue is I think that a lot of the game expects you don't pick up a hockey game if you don't like hockey, right? Like you don't. And so the interesting thing I find fascinating about it is that like it really shines a light on how much cultural knowledge games often rely on you having, and how it does not bother me at all when I have that cultural knowledge, and really becomes a problem when I don't. To use this as an example, like all fantasy games where it's just kind of like, oh, well, that's elven magic. I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. Like elves tend to be very magical and long-lived and all this sort of stuff. But if you don't have that back knowledge, it'd be like, what, elves like that live in the trees, like Keebler? Like what?
The cookie people?
Yeah, like what are we doing here? I'm supposed to be scared of those, like so again, and so here I have none of the cultural knowledge. So the game doesn't do any heavy lifting to help someone like myself, right? But I also don't think that the game should, because if you're playing it, you should probably have that knowledge, the same way if you're playing, Elden Ring or The Lord of the Rings, the video game, right? You probably have read the book, right?
I think sports games are in that weird place, and we've continued to encounter this problem, as you said, from like the other sports games, which is like, when we played Tecmo Bowl, like it expected you to know how football's played, and when we played Base Wars, it expected you to know how baseball's played. I will actually say one thing hockey has going for it compared to American football or baseball is like you're generally playing the goddamn game. Whereas like football stops every play, baseball stops every play. There's like a million things that make the action grind to a halt. And it's not always clear unless you know the rules of the game. Is it good that the action ground to a halt? Like, was that beneficial to me that the action ground to a halt? Whereas in hockey, generally, and in this interpretation of the game, it's kind of stuff is just kind of happening, right? Like the puck is going toward one net or the other. People are fighting. The game is sort of happening. So even if you don't really understand the rules of hockey, at least things are there for you to observe. So that is kind of an advantage that this sports game has over some of the other sports games we've played is not having that cultural knowledge is less of an impedance to enjoyment because, hey, at least things are happening.
Well, true. One of the things though that I struggled with was that so when there's a penalty, you go into a face-off, I think, right?
Yeah, that sounds
yeah,
right.
Yeah. So like basically the idea is that you there is a way to play the game and a way not to play the game. And when you do the not playing the game, you get penalized. And then the penalty, as far as I could tell in this one, was that they just reset you and they make you do a thing. I don't know what the penalties are in hockey. So I was getting penalties all the time. And I don't know if that's a function of the game and its sensitivity to penalties. But also, I was surprised that there were honestly penalties at all because, again, you can have a chainsaw on the field. So this doesn't feel like a very litigious group of people, you know?
Yeah, so this is the other side of the, hey, you don't really have to know hockey to play this video game coin. The other side of that coin is, but if you wanna, right? Because when you're choosing, so you can play like a one-on-one game, a series of games, or a cup, a pennant, whatever the hell it's called, the Super Bowl. So you can like choose that when you are choosing your teams. And on that screen, you can also choose how strict do you want them to be about penalties, which, if I recall correctly, I think is literally just on or off, and how violent do you want the violence to violence. And if you put those things at opposite extremes, you have a noticeably different gameplay experience, right? So I turned the penalties off and I turned the violence all the way up, and then I just murdered my way to victory, where every game lasted like 30 seconds because while they were foolishly trying to score goals, I was just killing their players. And if you kill enough opposing players, you just win that match.
So they were playing hockey and you were playing Running Man.
Yes. And the game absolutely affords you the freedom to do that. Or you can do the opposite, where you can turn the violence all the way down and you can turn penalties on. And then violence is allowed and even kind of encouraged, but there are penalties. And when you have penalties on, the penalty in hockey is this player has to leave the ice. So if you don't have enough players to field an entire team, I don't know if you just forfeit or if you just have to play man down until their penalty is up and they're allowed to come out of the penalty box. There's whole screens in animations just dedicated to seeing the penalties that you may never see if you have the penalties turned off. And I think they're turned off by default. I think they might be off by default. So like you can go to a face-off without seeing like, oh, this player is now in the penalty box, right? So it's you can absolutely play this game and be successful without knowing anything about how hockey is played. But if you want to like play with the systems and tweak the settings to get it to where you have an ideal gameplay experience for what you are trying to get out, then they're kind of like, well, now we sort of need you to understand how hockey is played because you're tweaking the rules of hockey.
Right. Well, and I think that's, again, and most sports games deal with this, which is that most sports deal with this, which is I remember at one point I was at a baseball game in college, and I said to the person next to me is I was like, they were saying like, okay, this is the inning that they're on, this is this is that, and they're going through it all. And I said, wait, I'm sorry, so what's this number like here? And they're like, okay, that's the total number of like events or something like that. I forget what it was, right? And I was like, all right, I'm sorry. So what you're telling me is that this game has been going on for 3 hours and 4 interesting things have happened the whole time? That's it. 4 things have happened. And they're like, well, no, there was like the strikes. I'm like, yeah. But like they successfully played baseball 4 times. And I was like, over 3 hours. That's 1.3 interesting things an hour. I was like, this is dumb.
It's not good.
Yeah, it's not a great and you paid to be here. Like they're not paying you. So I say all that though to say that it took some time for somebody to explain to me that the interesting thing about baseball and about most sports is the narrative. It's not the actual thing that happens. It's like, oh, well, I know how well this person does, but they don't typically do well against this team or against this type of pitcher. So I want to see how this plays out. And so you need a lot of knowledge in order to really enjoy it, to get the depth out of it. And I feel like this game has the same thing, right? Whereas if you don't know anything about hockey, to me, is I was just kind of like skating around the ice, and you get the puck, and you run up to the goal, and you try to slap it in, and if you don't, then you try to get it back, and you go back up to the goal, and you try to slap it in, and it was it would be like Legend of Zelda if they took the entire game and made it a shooting alley,
Yeah.
And so I'm like, and the thing is, it would be like if you played Legend of Zelda, that's all you played, and then somebody said, "So what do you think of Legend of Zelda?" And you're like, I don't know, it's a lackluster shooter, I guess. I don't know, And so that's kind of what I got from this, is that there just didn't seem to be a lot to the game, but I think that was more so my ability to understand the greater depth of what's going on in the game, So if I was playing a man down, I probably didn't even notice,
Well, and you have hinted at what I believe is the overwhelming requirement for this game and games like this game, certainly for players like us, if not just players in general, which is you got to play this with another person, because the 2-player mode plays exactly like the single player mode, and that is critical for a game where the field of where important things are happening can be quite large, but the field of where all your attention should be is quite small, right? So the camera is always on the puck. It doesn't matter which character you're controlling. It doesn't matter which character the other player or the computer is controlling. Camera's always on the puck. So there's this hyper focus, like this is where you need to direct your attention right now. And in single player, you sort of take that for granted because you're like, well, the camera is where I need to be, right? In 2-player, it's not necessarily true. You may be way the hell off camera, but you really shouldn't be. You should be over here where the puck is. So playing this with another, I got to play through a little bit with another player, and I wouldn't say that the game itself felt very different. It certainly didn't play very different. I didn't feel like I had tremendous success or failure that was different from when I was playing against a computer. Difference is I had fun. Like, I enjoyed, because the person I was playing with also doesn't know much about hockey, also doesn't really care for sports video games, right? So like we were attacking it from a similar place, which meant we were able to focus on like, aha, I got you, the other human, right? Like I stabbed you with a chainsaw. I scored on you, on your team. I like it added that narrative and that drama that you just don't easily fall into with the computer unless you are also deeply invested in the sport, right? Like if you play, Madden 2029 by yourself and you love football because football's football, then like, yeah, maybe you can project that narrative onto the computer, but like I can't, I don't care. But having another human there was all the audience foil I needed to be like, haha, I got you, right? And like start to get swept up in that. I don't think it would have lasted for, hours and hours and hours of play, but it was enough to immediately let me like suspend my disbelief and pretend I care about the sport and like have that communal narrative event.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. So I think that sports games, especially, so fantasy is one of the core aesthetics, but I think also too that generally community is as well, right? In the same way that like, fighting games, right? Versus fighting games, like that. Yeah, you can play the computer and that exists to mostly to just help you get good. So that way you can then go play with your friends. Right. And the same thing with the single player here is that I think that, and I think that this game in particular would lend itself to, that enjoyable couch co-op experience, because one of the things I remember the most, and we have still done this when we have been playing, on Twitch, right, or on the stream, is that we'll be playing a 2-player versus thing, and like I will still reach over and like punch you, or you'll punch me,
Yes.
Like we're in our late 30s, and it's just like hey, stop that, and it's just like haha, I'm winning, and then you just start swatting the other person's controller. It's like, oh, you're losing now, and this game even more so encourages it because it's you can get a chainsaw, right? So like if the whole point is it's hockey, but you get to break the rules. It's like, okay, well then if it's hockey and you get to break the rules, then it's also video games and you get to break the rules, So I imagine to your point, right? So I imagine that would be a lot more fun than, I got the puck, I went to the goal, I shot at the goal, I got the puck,
Well, and this game is a contemporary of like serious hockey games. Like there were the Genesis and the Super Nintendo, and I mean this is 94, so soon after this you're talking like PlayStation and N64. Like that, this game is a contemporary of serious, I actually care about the sport of hockey games. And so why on earth would you reach for Mutant League, right? Like you just wouldn't. You don't reach for Mutant League Hockey if you're like, oh, I actually love the sport of hockey and I like the game and I like the drama in the sportsmanship and the craft of the sport, right? Like I know people who like hockey that much and probably sit around and play NHL by themselves against the computer because they love the sport of hockey. They're insane and wrong, but like, whatever, asses in seats and all of that. So, but you would never reach for this. Like if I went to one of those people and I said, oh, but have you played Mutant League Hockey? They would probably, laugh me right out of their game room because that's not what this is. This is punching your friend in the shoulder and being like, I chainsawed you, right? Like that's what this is.
Dude, I'm just picturing like when you say the sport of hockey, I'm just picturing, like
the derision in your voice. Like I could feel the air quotes settle down onto my shoulders next to my ears. The sport of hockey.
It's how you hit the T. The sport of hockey. Anyways, but like is that everybody's in the ice box and they've got their snifter of brandy and like their cigars. They're talking about the local markets and all sorts of stuff, and then it goes like, whoa, and like the mutant comes like flying through like the shield and goes like, this isn't your father's hockey, and like smacks the drink out of the hand. It's like, Mutant League Hockey, buy it today. Like I imagine that being a commercial for this.
I guarantee you that was a commercial for this. Like there's just that time in history, this kind of marketing, the audience they were marketing to, there's just absolutely no, because this is, I think, going to sound more negative than I actually mean it to, but this isn't your father's whatever, or this isn't your mother's whatever. Like there's a reason that phrasing exists, because you, the 7 to 16-year-old at this time in history, you don't love hockey, but you've kind of been around it your entire life. But why have you been around it your entire life? Because your father loves hockey, right? Because your mother loves baseball, because your big brother loves football, right? Like you are around this sport or this activity because someone older in your life who gets something out of it that you don't understand because you're a kid, they get that thing out of it. And so that person now has a vested interest in you liking hockey because dad likes hockey. So dad wants his son to like hockey, right? Mom likes baseball. So mom really wants her daughter to like baseball. So they go to baseball games together. So you buy the kid the stupid kid version of the sports game, right? Or the kid is starting to show interest on their own. So it's like, oh, let me bring in these like silly Saturday morning cartoon elements, right? Like this is in a way that I don't think is probably entirely true, but it's not entirely untrue. This is exactly as cynical as Captain Crunch or the Trix Rabbit. Like,
yeah,
you need the kid to eat cereal, so you slap a cartoon character on the box, right? You want the kid to like hockey, so you slap some mutants and some violence on the box, and then they are more likely to like hockey.
Well, and also too, like if you want to make something cool, is that the way to define everything in the universe is that which is A and that which is not A, right? So if you know what's not cool, then the opposite of that must be cool. And parents are never cool because parents, used to be with it, but then they changed what it was. And now what they're with isn't it. And what is it is weird and strange to them. And it'll happen to you.
I wasn't sure if you were going to go with The Simpsons or the Will Smith parents just don't understand.
But yes, no, it is fascinating because I am just waiting for my kids to hit that age where they're like, Dad, you just don't get it. And it's like, no, the unfortunate thing, son, is I do, and I stopped caring. Like you misunderstand. It's not a lack of understanding; it's a lack of care. But anyways, so the one other thing I kind of wanted to mention, is as I've said, the kind of my main through line for I don't gets the hockey is do I could not correlate what generated a fight. Were you able to do so?
Dude, no. And it
Makes me feel
frustrates
better.
me because I started to attempt to figure it out where I was like, okay, I'm just going to hyper focus on, can I incite violence, right? Like, can I do the circumstances that lead to the word fight appearing on the screen? And I couldn't do it.
So you started to try to correlate those two things, and then just upon the screen came sic hunt dracanis, like here there be dragons, like don't try this.
I don't know if it's that complicated, but this is one of the few things where like illness caught up with me, right? Where I was just like, I don't have the time and the focus to run this particular experiment, right? Because I was like trying to play the game on its own terms and like meet it where it was. And then I was just like, violence is happening. I'm trying to kill people basically constantly. Like they're playing hockey and I'm also in a hockey rink, but I'm mostly playing this kind of like lightweight, simple fighter. And
so you were playing Friday the 13th where you're Jason.
yes.
And
yeah. Yeah.
And everybody else is just the teens at the hockey rink.
Yeah, and somehow didn't realize that Friday the 13th was happening to them. So
well, because there's no music. If there was music, they'd be able to,
so I kept trying to like cause a fight to happen. And I mean, they happen a lot, but like I couldn't figure out like, oh, if you attack them on this part of the screen or in this way or this number of times or like what control variables. Yeah, dude, I have no idea.
Yeah. Okay. That makes me feel a little bit better because one of the things that, and again, I don't think this is on the game. I think this is on me. Is that between not knowing what generated a fight and not knowing what generated a penalty, I spent very little time actually playing hockey, So basically what would end up happening is I would make a score point, right? And then the rest of the time I just like then tried to just run out the clock between fighting and penalties and just, but yeah, like a 3-minute half would be like, sorry, no one else can see that, but just your disdainful shaking of your head. It's like, I'm not gonna bite. Is it like a 2-minute period would end up being like 5 to 7 minutes because it would be like, all right, guys, let's go. Let's hit the hockey puck. And then, oh no, wait, stop. You know what it felt like? It felt like, watching my kids set up to play a game,
Oh God. Yeah. Just ages and ages of like, okay, no, wait, now put that over there. Okay. No, wait. Okay. No, wait. Okay.
Yeah,
okay. No, wait.
No. Yeah, this is where this is. Okay. Pause. Wait, no, pause. Okay. This is where this other thing is. Okay. Pause. Unpause. Pause. Wait. So it's like, oh my God.
Yeah. And you actually just reminded me of something that I wanted to make sure I mentioned, not because it's good or bad. I just thought it was a choice. Did you look at the clock at all while it was running?
Yeah, it's like a bat wing thing.
Did you notice it runs at like 1,000,000 miles an hour? Like those are not seconds, dude. They're not even close. Because there's I think you can have a 3-minute period, a 5-minute period, or an 8-minute period. And just the time is just like it's just flying by to the point where I didn't even consider 5 minutes as like a useful amount of time. I was like, I'm either going to play a 3-minute period when I just want to see if I can like hyper violence them into defeat, or if I want to actually attempt to play the game, then it has to be an 8-minute period. Otherwise there isn't enough time for anything to happen.
No, I didn't. I actually did not look at it long enough to note how fast the time was going down. I just kept glancing at it to be like about how long is left, But yeah, now that you mention it, it does just go screaming by, which I think then is an even kind of further indictment of the number of penalties / fights I was getting into, where I was like, oh my God, this 3 minutes is lasting forever. It's like, dude, it's actually only 1 minute and it still is lasting forever.
Yeah. It's got, you remember in the original Super Mario Brothers, people used to say like, oh yeah, you have 180 seconds to get through or 300 seconds or whatever. And it's like, no, you have 300 counts, but it is not counting seconds. This, on the other hand, is acting like it's counting regular time. So it is noticeable that like, oh, that clock is really flying.
Yeah, and especially because they got the little colon, which means it has to be time. I literally sent to one of the guys, as I said, like, I'll meet you there at 2. And I said, or 1400 if you want to be weird about it. And because I just wrote 200 without the colon, he's like, yeah, I was about to say, man, I'm not going anywhere with you at 2 a.m. You know? And I was like, yeah, no, that's fair, because you need the little colon. But yes, unlike with Mario, where there is no little colon, this one has the colon, which means that it is definitely time. That's I mean, they probably did it because, you know, if you're like, oh, I want a 3-minute, you know, round, right? It would last forever, you know? So yeah.
I got one other thing I wanted to make sure I mentioned, just because I am legitimately fascinated by this as someone who, you know, ostensibly plays video games sort of for a living. I thought the ice physics were like really good. Like
yeah.
When you think about a Nintendo game, a Super Nintendo game, a Genesis game, and you think about ice, you're probably thinking about a game like Mario, where you are trying to do tricky platforming and you're slipping all over the place and it's annoying and you hate it and it's stupid and dumb and you're like, God, I hate ice levels. These are almost as bad as water levels, right? Like
almost. Yeah. I mean, they are water levels. They're just, you know, anything with water in video games is no bueno.
all bad. But in games like we played Tecmo, we played NBA Jam, like we've played other sports games, but they've always been like on land, and you have, you know, knees made of vibranium where you could be running full tilt in any direction and then instantly be running full tilt in another direction. And it's like, how is that person still like on their feet? Right. But it's just, it's a video game. You just, you know, I'm sure we didn't bring that up at the time because it's just how you expect video games to feel, right? It needs to be like snappy and responsive. This game intentionally is not snappy and responsive. And I think is 100% the right choice, right? When you try to make a turn, you sort of like skid and skate because you're on ice. When you try to stop in reverse direction, you kind of slowly grind to a halt, right? You don't have a button to do like a hockey stop where you like dig your skates in because the game's not that sophisticated. But generally, the fact that everything feels like sort of mushy and slippery not only is executed well, but I think is absolutely the right choice. And when I did get to play this game 2-player, the person I was playing with was like, God, it's so hard to control. Oh, we're on ice. And I was like, right. Oh, you're on ice. So it is hard to control, and it should be, which I thought was actually executed really well.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. And I think that if it didn't work that way, then it wouldn't be a hockey game, you know, because there's a lot of things that happen in hockey games. So for example, when you go screaming up to the goalpost and you slap the roller derby ball. If you whether you hit or miss, you tend to go back around behind the goal, you know, which is typical in hockey because, to your point, right, is that hockey players have to not worry about this game, but also the next 50 games, right? You know. So they're not going to blow their knees out for no reason, right? They're just going to continue their momentum through. They're not going to waste all of the energy and exhaustion to do that. So if you had pinpoint precision, you would never do that because it is a suboptimal thing to do. So it would just cease to feel like a hockey game. And so just like in hockey, half of the battle is controlling your momentum, you know? And so you know, it is interesting because I'm wondering if in Mario games, so would ice levels be as frustrating if in Mario if all of the levels were ice levels? You know what I'm saying? Like, is it frustrating because you have a basis of comparison?
Yeah. I mean, maybe. Like, I've played platformers that had slippery, floatier controls, and like you acclimate and then you stay acclimated, right? You don't have to flip flop.
Yeah, and also too is especially if you built the game around it, right? If the whole point of the game was momentum control, more similar to like Sonic, right? You know, Yeah, I think that could work. What makes it annoying is that you've gotten used to the game behaving one way, and now it's behaving another way, and now you have to like switch gears. And then when you die because of it, it's obviously the game's fault, you know?
Always. Well, and you raise an interesting thought, like, what do you call it? Thought experiment, because in Mario Ice levels, you still generally have platforms that are roughly the same size. You're trying to do roughly the same thing, which is get from point A to point B. And the point is, it is harder, not because the platforms are smaller or because there's more enemies, but because you have lost some of your control and precision. If you basically made a 2D platformer that was like a skateboarding game, where it's like, okay, you need to maintain this momentum so that you can clear this obstacle, or so that you can, do this wall jump or whatever. Like, now it's not, oh, I'm having such a hard time controlling myself. The problem space would shift to like, can I build up enough speed? Can I get along of enough runway, right? And you would never call those controls slippery, because the point is to be slip, sliding along.
Right. Yeah, I think that controls feel slippery. They feel slippery when it's at odds with the game, So like the game, and I was, what game was I playing recently? Blanking on it. That's what it was. Is I was playing Entropy Center, which we will discuss on the next podcast. Good game. But there are occasions where I said to Teddy, I was like, that's frustrating. And Teddy was like, what? And I said, they are relying on their game engine having a degree of precision that it lacks. And Teddy's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm like, I know, don't worry about it. But I was like, because basically they were like, oh, we want you to do this very specific thing. And I was like, your controls aren't precise enough to do that. I didn't screw that up. The controls were gummy, and that's why I got screwed up. So that's when it feels wrong. So in this one, it feels right, because I think of two reasons. One is they built the game around it, right? Like, so they don't expect, in order for you to score a goal, you don't have to be at a dead stop and like focused on the goalie. You're going to be sliding by him, and you just slap the puck in as you go. And there's no, and that maybe even this is why there's no basketball level, right? Like if it switched between the hockey level and the basketball level, the hockey levels would probably be more frustrating because you're slip sliding all over the place, right? Basketball levels, you're not. But because it's just hockey all day long, you just get used to it. Human beings can get used to anything.
True. My final comment, just because I think this is surprisingly sophisticated for a Genesis game, is this game has built-in instant replay that is available to you at all times. At any time,
wild.
You can just be like, no, show me that again. And I was like, oh, that's like pretty impressive. And I think you can rewind up to like 30 seconds or a minute or something. It's huge. Like, it's pretty goddamn impressive, considering every once in a while I will go to take a screenshot on my PlayStation 5 and it like it chokes switching between the game and the screenshot menu, because it's like, whoa, now we got to bring up this extra menu on the screen. The fact that this Genesis game from 1994, at any point you could just be like, wait, pause, rewind, friggin' Minority Report style. Pretty impressive bit of technology. I didn't care. I give zero craps about it, because that would only ever matter to me if I was playing against another human and I wanted to rub in their face something incredible that I just did because I'm amazing, which I didn't have enough exposure to do that. But the fact that the technology is there at all, kind of awesome.
How yeah, like, so basically that means that it's constantly recording and then just deleting it after 1 minute or something like that, right?
So
how does that work?
In a game, I mean, there's multiple ways you could implement something like this. In a game like this, my assumption would be what it is actually keeping track of is like path data, right? So it has in memory, these people were in this place. And then when you rewind it, it is literally redrawing them to those locations. It is not making a video recording like we would think of today. It is saying these players were in these places, they followed these paths, and store a running log of that data, and then just dump off the oldest data and write in the newest data.
So basically it's as the person is speaking, it's writing a book. It's writing down what they're saying. And then if it says like, wait, can you go back and say that? It's not replaying a recording. It's just having the person go back and read it again.
Exactly. And from a technology optimization standpoint, that would be way more accessible, right? Whereas saying, no, I want you to actually render this out to a video file. Like, no, the Genesis is not even pretend capable of that.
See, I learned something. Actually, we were talking about a thing at work recently. I was really happy with this analogy, which was the person said, well, how many people are capable of generating this data that we present, right? And I said, like, well, because she said, how many people are capable of presenting it? I was like, there are 6 people that are capable of generating the data. But everyone is capable of presenting it because of how easy it is to present, right? It's just very understandable. She looked confused. I said, we've got 6 people who can write books, but everybody is illiterate.
Nice.
And she,
nice.
And she was like, oh, okay. I was like, yeah. So, I mean, you're just reading the board. Everyone knows how to read the board, but only 6 people know how to write the book that they then read. And I was happy with that. But so it's that though. That's
it is that. And all of the actors have the ability to perfectly duplicate their performance, right? So
yes,
if you say skate from here to here and then fall down, they will do it exactly the same way every single time, right? So that fidelity is why it feels like it's a video recording, because it is as accurate as a video recording.
It's high fidelity.
The word fidelity was almost completely ruined for me by friggin' Westworld. Like, what are you testing for? Fidelity, right? Like it.
Oh God, season 1 of that was amazing.
So good.
And they went off the rails.
So off the rails.
Anything else?
No, we can talk about whether or not we thought it held up. Which I will give this a nostalgia goggles with an asterisk. You must play this game with another person. Like, if you
nostalgia goggles or no nostalgia goggles?
Sorry, I'm going to blame the illness. Nostalgia monocle with an asterisk.
So neither.
No. And thank God you're here.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Nostalgia monocles with an asterisk, which is you must play this game with another person, because this game, like every sports game, is just like jank as hell to play alone unless you are super duper into the sport. And if you're super duper into the sport, you're not playing Mutant League Hockey. You're playing one of the many, many, many iterations of NHL 2K, whatever, right? So like the animations, I think are actually pretty solid overall. Like I wasn't quite as down on them as you. Like there's a lot of Saturday morning cartoon flavor in here that I appreciate and respect. I wish there was a little bit more like silly music that they lean into, but I get why they cut it out. The game plays super smooth. Like it's not bad. Like it is not a bad, silly sports game. It's just like a 2-player fighter, like every other sports game we've played. You really need to play this against another human. So nostalgia monocle with another human, right? Like that's
yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's not like, oh, if you have another person, it bumps it up to no nostalgia goggles. Nostalgia monocle if you have the conditions to meet nostalgia monocle. So, is it terrible? No, but like most silly 90s grungy sports games, it's like, yeah, okay. Like it's funny. It's cute. I get it. Play with another person for 30 minutes and then forget about it for another 35 years.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes this one kind of hard for me to rank, because honestly, I would give it no nostalgia goggles for the first 30 minutes. And then, it's done, so like if somebody said, should I play this? I'd be like, yeah, how much money are you going to spend on it? It's free. Yeah, sure. Boot it up for 30 minutes, have some fun, chainsaw some people to death, get in some fights, and then forget about it forever, So, I mean, like I said, like I didn't think that the animations were amazing, but they weren't terrible, I didn't find the game engaging, but I will never find games like this engaging. So, as far as did this game, Roger my Hammerstein? No, but for somebody who likes hockey games, it probably slaps.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black, and you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone, there's no player 2 there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head. from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creep in with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day than on all the experience gained. At the end of it all, gamers play what we play, not for game over, but rather for what we take away. The world is sad, but who cares? People know that that's not what you came for. Your next adventure already is sight. You're all set to go. You're excited to see what's all wrong till it's right, and the world is safe. So you're more along for the ride.